Chapter 974. At nearly 5 o'clock in the afternoon, in an old county in the jurisdiction of Southwest City, Chen Fangqing, who was a little tired, sat on a chair with a blank face and slowly drank a mouthful of warm water. The winter night was long, and dusk gradually enveloped the sky. The cold wind blew in from the open door of the main hall. It was cold, and the old but still spacious yard looked very cold. After the funeral, it was dead silent. Chen Fangqing was sitting facing the door, and his expression was a little dull. Behind him was an empty ice coffin, and the room was filled with the smell of burning paper money. He sat motionless on the chair, looking a little gloomy. Today was the day of the burial of his daughter, Chen Lijuan. Chen Fangqing returned to his hometown in a low-key manner. The funeral didn't last more than half, which looked extremely simple. In the parliament, Guo Wenyan, who was also a banner figure of the prince group like Chen Fangqing, attended the funeral. In addition, a secretary-general and deputy mayor of Southwest City were also present, and then some relatives who were neither far nor close. Chen Fangqing lowered his head, and his eyes were a little sinister, but more self-deprecating. As the prime minister of Zhongzhou State, the funeral had been simple to the point of being a little shabby. It also seemed to prove his status in the prince group. If it was in the period when his influence was at its strongest, even if he repeatedly stated that the funeral should be simple and refused other officials to attend, there would definitely be a lot of people who would really attend. Even if those officials knew that they would be criticized by him after coming, they would still come. The most obvious example was when Guo Wentian's old mother died the year before last. Guo Wenyan also had a simple funeral, but the scene of the funeral was extremely grand. Guo Wentian's hometown was in an ordinary city in Tianfu province. On the day of the funeral, 6 directors of Tianfu province were present, including the speaker of Tianfu and the governor. In addition, the speaker of Southwest City, which was nearby, was also present in person. All the city leaders were present. Although Guo Wenyan severely criticized those people afterward, no one was unhappy, whether they were criticized or criticized. Now, Chen Fangqing's funeral was also simple. Then it really became simple. This alone was enough to show that Chen Fangqing's status in the prince group had reached a precarious point. The Haoyue group scandal was constantly being exposed every day. From Nanyue province to Tianfu province, it had now become a serious case that swept across 4 to 5 provinces, involving property, entertainment, securities, insurance, and many other industries. The countless dark sides were shocking. This also represented incredible interests. Even Chen Fangqing did not expect that his nephew would do so many outrageous things in terms of accumulating wealth. The stock price of Haoyue Group had been fluctuating violently. In a short period of time, hundreds of cadres in several provinces had been arrested. The Ministry of Supervision of Zhongzhou State personally took action and handled the case swiftly and decisively. But Chen Fangqing knew very well that although everything seemed to be extremely bad, the Ministry of Supervision had not really taken action yet. They were still collecting more evidence. Before the election, the Southeast Group, which had been holding back for more than 2 years, obviously wanted to make a big news. Faced with such a favorable environment, the other party obviously did not intend to make a move easily. Several large state-owned groups controlled by Chen Lijuan were also found to have countless problems. There were also clues that the treason case of the Special Warfare Group had something to do with Chen Fangqing. Such a connection might not be too serious, but at such a critical moment, if such news was confirmed, it was bound to cause another huge storm. The situation was precarious and precarious. Chen Fangqing's but was like an active volcano that would erupt violently at any time, and he might be blown to pieces every minute and every second. In this case, countless people in the prince group were quietly distancing themselves from Chen Fangqing, including 2 provincial chairmen he had personally promoted. Chen Fangqing remained silent. He could only be silent, waiting for the opportunity to fight back in silence. Such an opportunity was getting closer and closer, and his situation was becoming more and more dangerous. In the gradually darkening sky, Chen Fangqing gritted his teeth and stood up with a glass of water. The cold wind blew through the room. Guo Wenyan, with a white flower on his chest, walked into the yard from the gate. Looking at Chen Fangqing walking out of the main hall, he sighed. It's time to go back. Guo Wendian said slowly, the comrades in the southwest have already prepared the plane. There may be a meeting tonight, so we have to prepare early. He took out a cigarette and handed it to Chen Fangqing. Then he lit one and took a deep breath. Chen Fangqing nodded silently. Today was destined to be a very special day. It was not his daughter's funeral, but for the dark world, today was a very special day. 3 days ago, Li Tianlan received a letter of challenge from a mysterious expert in Emperor Dong's palace. And the time of the challenge was today. 2 super experts who had surpassed the peak of the invincible realm. And it was very likely that they were in the dark world. They were the super experts who were in the best state. Everyone was paying attention to this battle, including the parliament of Zhongzhou state. At this moment, there were less than 4 hours before the battle. Different results of this battle meant different situations. Not to mention the mentality of the parties, countless people in the dark world had begun to get nervous. Is there any movement in Xianyuan City? Chen Fangqing asked. There's no big movement. Guo Wendian shook his head. The representatives sent by all the superpowers have entered the headquarters of Emperor Dong's palace, and Xianyuan City has strengthened its guard. It's normal. On the second day after the letter of challenge was issued, all the forces in the dark world had contacted Emperor Dong's palace. Emperor Dong's palace did not refuse the requests of the superpowers and allowed any force to come to Emperor Dong's palace to watch the peak battle of the dark world in person at the specified time. It seemed like they were showing off their strength, but it also seemed like they were extremely confident. Every move of Emperor Dong's palace in the past 3 days was full of confidence. From top to bottom, no one seemed to think that Li Tianlan might lose. What do you think of the result of this battle? Guo Wendian suddenly asked. Chen Fangqing turned his head and glanced at him silently. This result is important to us, but it's more important to you. Guo Wendian's tone was extremely calm. Chen Fangqing suddenly laughed. I don't know, he said blandly, but this may be my only chance. The result of this battle is hard to say. Li Tianlan may win, but I won't lose. Li Tianlan might win the battle. But the winner of the final battle in Beihai could only be him and the Prince Group. In Chen Fangqing's communication with His Majesty and Li Guangtu in advance, as long as Li Tianlan appeared in Beihai, the possibility of him dying was more than 80%. So the result of tonight's battle was not important. The final battle in Beihai that would start at the same time as this battle was the most important. Guo Wendian looked at his smiling face and was silent for a moment. Then he said in a hoarse voice, recently, our work has been very passive, and the voices within the group are a little chaotic. I have discussed it with some comrades. He raised his head and looked at Chen Fangqing's eyes that suddenly became sharp. He said blandly, Old Chen, if the result of this final battle in Beihai is not satisfactory, then you should temporarily stay behind the scenes and recuperate. Chapter 975. Chen Fangqing did not speak. He quietly looked at Guo Wendian in front of him and kept silent for a long time. He and Guo Wendian had known each other for more than 30 years. The two had already known each other when they first emerged in the Prince Group, but for many years, the relationship between them had not been harmonious. They were promoted to the level of deputy governor together, and then to the position of provincial governor together. Finally, they became the provincial speaker almost at the same time, and then were elected as members of parliament of Zhongzhou state. 5 years as a member of parliament. During that period, the relationship between Chen Fangqing and Guo Wendian was at its worst. They could almost be said to be incompatible with each other, even to the point of life and death. Because at that time in the Prince Group, there was a person named Zhou Tong. At that time, he was a member of parliament of Zhongzhou state and the speaker of Tianfu province. At that time, Zhou Tong was the recognized leader of the Prince Group and the most likely powerful figure to become the new president of Zhongzhou state. In the process of competing with Li Huaqing, Zhou Tong could be said to be in the lead all the way. Everyone thought that Zhou Tong would be elected without any suspense. At that time, the Prince Group was very strong, but it was far from being able to cover the sky with one hand. In order to push Zhou Tong up, The Prince Group also made a lot of compromises in secret. When it was tit for tat with the academics, it promised a lot of conditions to the Southeast Group and the Giant Group. This also meant that if Zhou Tong was successfully elected president at that time, even if the whole Prince Group went all out, it could only push a director who could protect Zhou Tong. This director position could only appear from Qin Fangqing or Guo Wenyan. With Zhou Tong's existence, only one of them could go up. This was something that they knew each other since they became members of parliament. At that time, the Prince Group could be said to be the most direct competitors. However, no one had expected that 1 month before the election, Zhou Tong, who had been firmly suppressing Li Huaqing, would suddenly be pulled down by Li Huaqing. Furthermore, he was thrown into the abyss. Li Huaqing had caught up to Zhou Tong at the most crucial moment, and Zhou Tong had fallen from heaven to hell, or more accurately, into the desert. Zhou Tong went to the desert prison. Li Huaqing became the president of Zhongzhou State. The Prince Group had no time to react. In the end, they could only push Qin Fangqing and Guo Wenyan together to become the directors of Zhongzhou State. Qin Fangqing was the prime minister, and Guo Wenyan controlled the National Assembly. They are number 2 and number 3 in Central State. But even so, this is still the biggest fiasco and mistake of the Prince Group in recent decades. After becoming a director, the relationship between Qin Fangqing and Guo Wenyan seems to have eased a lot, but the game between the two was too fierce, and there are still clear cracks inside the Prince Group. Qin Fangqing habitually considered problems from the perspective of the overall situation. What he saw was the overall situation, the future of Zhongzhou State, and the overall interests. Guo Wenyan is more like the real leader of the Prince Group. He values the interests and future of the Prince Group more. In terms of structure, Qin Fangqing was far superior to Guo Wenyan, but in terms of ability, Guo Wenyan was slightly superior to Qin Fangqing. The ideas of the two were not exactly the same. For so many years, how could there be real harmony within this seemingly peaceful Prince Group? Qin Fangqing had been under a lot of pressure recently and had almost lost sleep all night. He had to guard against the Southeast Group, Li Tianlan, and Li Huaqing. But most importantly, he had to guard against Guo Wenyan, who had been quiet all the time. As his situation worsened, Qin Fangqing knew very well that Guo Wenyan would definitely take action. But he did not expect that Guo Wenyan would take action at this time. "You are not optimistic about the final battle in Beihai?" Qin Fangqing asked directly. He knew very well what Guo Wenyan meant by that sentence. If the final battle in Beihai did not get the result they wanted, then he would retreat behind the scenes to cultivate. Once he retreated, there was basically no possibility for him to appear again. There was still nearly a year before the election. If he went to cultivate at this time, the entire Prince Group would fall into the hands of Guo Wenyan. Guo Wenyan obviously wanted to use this year to stabilize his position, even if he had to sacrifice a large part of his strength. And this sacrifice was obviously Qin Fangqing's team. No one can predict the future. I'm not optimistic or pessimistic. I just think that there are too many variables in this matter. Guo Wenyan said faintly, "Li Tianlan is not a fool, and neither is the Wang family of Beihai. Even if the power in your hands is very strong, I really don't believe that the other party will not have any precautions. Don't forget the strange intelligence channels of the Samsara Palace. How could they not know? And I can be sure that Li Tianlan took Li Shi back to Tianan. On the night he received the letter of challenge, he went directly to the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital in Heaven Capital. From Li Tianlan's departure to the present, no one has come out of Heaven Capital for 3 days. Even the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, which is about to start, didn't send a representative to watch the battle. Li Kuangta didn't tell you about sending a representative to watch the battle, did he?" "What do you mean?" Qin Fangqing's body trembled slightly. He had not paid attention to Heaven Capital recently. This was the sincerity of his cooperation with Li Kuangtu. They were all allies. Paying too much attention to each other would only cause misunderstanding. No one is sure what happened in the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. But in 3 days, if you want to talk about people, even a dog has not come out of the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, and no one has entered it. The headquarters of the entire Purgatory of Heaven Capital. He was silent for a while and said in a hoarse voice, "It's like death." An indescribable chill spread all over Chen Fangqing's body in an instant. "Is it?" His voice trembled a little. "Li Tianlan killed everyone in the purgatory of heaven capital? I don't know," Guo Wenyan said lightly, "but just by this action, we can at least be sure that Li Tianlan already knows that Li Guangtu will participate in the decisive battle in North Sea, but Emperor Dong's palace has not shown the slightest retreat so far. Li Tianlan is not afraid of this at all. In this decisive battle, Li Tianlan is very likely to die." "Oh, only you believe this, because you have to believe it." Chen Fangqing's face twitched. He stood there gloomily and did not speak. "At the very least, even if you really win, it may not be a good thing." Guo Wenyan continued, "His Majesty and Li Guangtu, who you said will challenge Li Tianlan tonight, are not easy to deal with. Even if you win this time, you may also lose more miserably in the future." "I won't lose." Chen Fangqing suddenly calmed down and said lightly. "Maybe." Guo Wenyan said quietly, "You said the decisive battle in North Sea will start tonight, then we will wait for the result tomorrow. You have been under too much pressure during this time, and everyone hopes you can take a rest." He deliberately emphasized the word, everyone. Chen Fangqing narrowed his eyes, his face expressionless. "Let's go back to Yuzhou." Guo Wenyan moved forward slowly. "You go back?" Chen Fangqing said lightly. Guo Wenyan looked at him in confusion. "You're not leaving?" "I'm going to Xianyuan City now, and then fly to North Sea overnight," Chen Fangqing said expressionlessly. Chapter 976. The bright light shone in the dark room, a little dazzling. Light and darkness intertwined, faintly reflecting the outline in the living room. The sound of the softly shaking reclining chair kept ringing. Looking at the gloomy and mysterious living room through the screen, everyone in the conference room looked solemn and dignified. Wang Xiaoyao was facing the screen. Beside them, the two grandmasters of the invincible realm in East Island, Tianhai Wuji and Yagyu Kurumi, sat opposite each other. Then Jiang Guochu and Moraid, the current controller of Knights Templars. There were not many people in the conference room, but they represented a considerable part of the power of the Dark World today. Everyone was really important in the Dark World today. The light flowed in the conference room. The five invincible realm experts quietly stared at the gloomy darkness on the screen in front of them, without saying a word. The meeting had lasted for nearly an hour, but from beginning to end, no one spoke. Time passed minute by minute. After a long time, a clear voice suddenly sounded in the conference room. It was like the sound of the lid of a teacup gently touching the edge of the cup, soft, delicate, and extremely pleasant. The five invincible realm experts present subconsciously turned their eyes and looked at each other. Only then did they realize that the sound came from the other end of the screen. Wang Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes. Moraid, Yagyu Kurumi, and Jiang Guochu stood up almost at the same time. "Your Majesty!" "Sit down." On the other side of the screen, His Majesty's voice sounded, and he said unhurriedly, "I'm sorry to keep you waiting. It's earlier than I expected." Wang Xiaoyao said calmly, "Are you ready?" His expression was serious and peaceful, without a trace of impatience. Everyone present knew what the hour they had been waiting for meant. Wang Xiaoyao subconsciously looked at the clock on the wall of the conference room. It was 8:05 p.m. in Zhongzhou State Time. At 10:27 p.m. 3 days ago, Li Tianlan returned to Xianyuan City from Yuzhou and received a letter of challenge from His Majesty. The summit appointment that had caused a sensation in the entire Dark World was getting closer and closer. There were less than 3 hours left. Today, the representatives of most of the forces in the Dark World had arrived in Xianyuan City. Behind each representative, there was at least a second-class force that was recognized by everyone. As the party of the summit appointment, His Majesty began his last meditation before the battle at noon that day, and he didn't wake up until now. This was truly a summit meeting. Li Tianlan and His Majesty might not be the only two people in the Dark World with the combat capability beyond the peak of the invincible realm. But combined with their age, this battle was also endowed with extraordinary significance. The outcome of this battle directly determined who was the first person in the dark world of this era and whose era it belonged to. His Majesty filled the cup in front of him with tea and stretched his body. He smiled and said, "It's very lively outside now. I can feel that everyone is here to watch the show. I'm going to appear." He glanced at Moraid and suddenly asked, "Are there any new movements in the outside world's gambling?" "There's basically no change." Moraid's attitude was always more respectful than that of Jiangguochu and Yagyukurumi. He lowered his head slightly and said softly, "At present, the outside world is generally more optimistic about Li Tianlan. Nearly 70% of the gambling funds support Li Tianlan's victory." Close to 70%. That means less than 70%. Jiang Shangyu was a little surprised. "That is to say, in the eyes of outsiders, I have a 64% chance of winning against Li Tianlan? Something like that?" Moraid nodded. The summit appointment attracted the attention of the whole dark world. As soon as the news came out, the major financial forces in the dark world, including the Flourishing Age Fund, had already opened bets. They bet on the outcome, the time of the battle, the post-war injuries, and so on. 3 days was not a long time, but the bets had attracted countless funds. The news Moraid received showed that the amount of money betting on Li Tianlan's victory was infinitely close to 70%. But others might not believe it. At least half of the money was bet by Moraid. Moraid bet on Li Tianlan's victory. This was His Majesty's order. Therefore, in this so-called bet, those who were looking forward to an upset bet on Li Tianlan were destined to lose everything. "You didn't play?" His Majesty smiled and shifted his gaze from Moraid to the others. 600 million on Li Tianlan's victory. Tianhai Wuji said calmly. Yagyukurumi glanced at him and shook his head. 90 million on Li Tianlan. Beihai bet 2 billion on Li Tianlan. I personally bet 300 million on Li Tianlan. Wang Xiaoyao was expressionless. 1 billion. Li Tianlan. Jiang Guichu smiled lazily and said, "No one expects to make a fortune by betting. It seems that there are more people who are optimistic about me than I thought." His Majesty smiled gently. "Li Tianlan is strong, but how can those people judge clearly when they are in the same realm? There are countless people who want you to win. Many people think that Li Tianlan is not invincible." Wang Xiaoyao's voice was indifferent. His Majesty said softly, "It's a pity that these people are going to be disappointed." The 5 invincible realm experts were indifferent. They knew the inside story of the final battle, so they all bet on Li Tianlan's victory under Moraid's lead. Before the battle began, His Majesty made it clear to them that he was not in his real peak state, so his odds of winning against Li Tianlan were less than 30%. This was a battle that he was almost certain to lose. "How are your preparations going?" His Majesty asked casually. "There are no problems. As soon as the battle between you and Li Tianlan begins, we will take action immediately. Finally, we will meet at the foot of Mount Dibbing." Wang Xiaoyao took a deep breath and said in a solemn tone, "Very good." His Majesty nodded and said, "It's time for me to make a fool of myself." "You know you will lose, but you still want to make a fool of yourself. Is it necessary?" Tianhai Wuji casually asked. "Ha!" His Majesty's laughter was full of indifference. "I will lose face tonight, but Li Tianlan will lose his life tonight. I will lose to Li Tianlan, and everyone will think that the future will be Li Tianlan's era. But he will die in Beihai tonight. The ultimate reversal. I like this feeling very much. Once he is dead, who will remember my failure?" He picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. "Believe me, I have been studying Li Tianlan for a long time. His current state is very wonderful, especially when he cooperates with Ruthless. Whether it is now or in the future or in the past, even when Wang Tianzong was in his heyday, Li Tianlan can be said to be the most difficult person to kill. His kendo is perfect." His Majesty was silent for a while and whispered, "But I don't believe that there is a so-called perfection in this world. No matter how perfect a martial arts is, there must be a weakness." Wang Xiaoyao sat up straight and said seriously, "What is Li Tianlan's weakness?" "I don't know." His Majesty shook his head. Tianhai Wuji sneered and said lightly, A weakness that is not known by others is equal to having no weakness. That's why I asked Li Tianlan to fight. His Majesty said coldly, "It's okay for me to lose face once, but as long as I seize his weakness, tonight will be Li Tianlan's death." Chapter 977. Moraid raised his head and glanced at His Majesty. There was some doubt in his eyes. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. In the end, he didn't say anything. Others might not know His Majesty's origin, but Moraid was His Majesty's confidant and disciple. In contrast, he was completely different from Jiang Guochu and Yagyu Kurasumi. The latter two were more cooperative with His Majesty. Although His Majesty occupied a dominant position, the essential alliance relationship had not changed. Only Moraid worshipped His Majesty as a real leader. He knew His Majesty's origin and even knew a lot of things that hadn't been experienced in this era. He knew Li Tianlan, Dongqing Huangtu, and Gu Xianyan. Did His Majesty not know Li Tianlan's weakness in the story of the future or the past? As if noticing Moraid's gaze, His Majesty said calmly, "I haven't fought with him." This sentence sounded a little inexplicable. But Moraid understood His Majesty's meaning in an instant. In that story, His Majesty had not fought with Dongqing Huangtu. All his understanding of him was summed up from limited intelligence, combined with some of his own speculations. When Dongqing Huangtu died, His Majesty was forced to fight and then returned here. Moraid was silent for a moment and then laughed. His smile was a little ferocious and insidious. No one knew if he was thinking of His Majesty's forbearance, helplessness, and sadness in that story or something else. His voice was extremely firm. "Your Majesty, don't worry. You are in Tianan. Leave Beihai to me." His Majesty nodded and glanced at Wang Xiaoyao. "It has been arranged." Wang Xiaoyao nodded. "Call the number I gave you. As long as you can successfully leave the battlefield, he will meet you outside Xinyuan City." "Are you sure there is no accident?" His Majesty's voice was cautious and serious. "If there is no accident, he and the helicopter have landed at the predetermined place. The only uncertainty is whether you can successfully leave the battlefield. As long as there is no accident, the helicopter will take you away from Tiannan at the fastest speed. In 30 minutes at most, you will appear at Nanyun No. 2 Air Force Base. The fighter plane will arrive in Liaodong within an hour, and then someone will arrange for you to arrive at Beihai as soon as possible." Wang Xiaoyao's voice was flat and casual. The commander of the Tiannan Freedom Corps was Ning Ziyuan. It was impossible for Ning Ziyuan to betray Emperor Dong's palace and the Li family, but it didn't mean that the Freedom Corps was full of Li Tianlan's people. Ning Ziyuan was a member of the Southeast Group before Li Tianlan appeared. Di Jiang had also led the Tiannan Freedom Corps before, so it was too easy for Wang Xiaoyao to plant some people there. His promise was strong enough. As long as His Majesty could leave the battlefield, he would be able to appear in the North Sea from Tiannan within 3 hours and participate in the upcoming battle in the North Sea. This speed was extremely fast. At the very least, he could guarantee that he would not be slower than Li Tianlan. "Very good." His Majesty nodded. "That's settled then." He slowly raised his hand and calmly said, "The meeting ends here. Everyone, I will keep my promise and I hope that everyone can do their best. It's 8:25, Zhongzhou State Time." In the vague darkness, he revealed an incomparably arrogant smile, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws. "In 12 hours, the dark world will officially welcome our era." Before hanging up, he said indifferently, "Let's meet again in North Sea." The screen went black. His Majesty had gone offline. Wang Xiaoyao stood up, came to the window of the conference room, and quietly looked at North Sea outside the window. This was still the hotel where he and Jiang Guochu met. The 5-star hotel under his feet, as well as the 202 branches all over the world, was an adult gift from Wang Tianzong when he was 18 years old. Wang Xiaoyao could still remember the scenes at that time, but he could no longer remember the excitement at that time. The night outside the window was quiet. It was snowing heavily. The wind and snow were blowing. Wang Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes tightly and was silent for a long time. "Let's get started," he said indifferently, turned around, bowed slightly to the other 4 invincible realm experts present and said flatly, "Everyone please." 12 hours later, he would become the new patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. The new era, the new history, was getting closer and closer. The dark cloak fluttered in the dark hall. 2 rows of guard-like armor stood quietly, as if they would never change. The crisp sound of footsteps echoed in the hall, making it seem extremely spacious. Mochizuki Song walked to an armor, expressionlessly stretched out his palm, and pressed it on the chest of the armor. A metal on the chest of the armor was pressed down by a pale and slender finger. Clatter! The sound of an object falling to the ground rang out in the silent hall, sounding extremely harsh. The moment the mechanism of the armor was activated, it swelled up. Countless black objects fell from the inside of the armor and scattered under Mochizuki Song's feet. Mochizuki Song's expression did not change. He bent down to gather the things on the ground bit by bit. It was a lot of black solid matter. It looked like some kind of rubber or some kind of alloy. Piece by piece, it was dark all over. In the dark, it looked like pieces of dark muscles. Mochizuki Song squatted down expressionlessly and covered one of the black muscles on his shoulder. Then his elbow, forearm, back, abdomen, legs, knees, and feet. This kind of alloy codenamed VX was not the top technology in the dark world. The alloy had been researched for more than a decade, and the formula had been leaked a few years ago. But there were not many people who were willing to use this alloy all the time. VX alloy's greatest function was to absorb a small amount of external force, minimizing the impact. This function could be said to be a divine function of a single-person armor, but its flaw was also extremely prominent, and that was the weight that was enough to affect flexibility. If VX alloy covered the whole body, it would weigh nearly 130 kilograms, and the cost was extremely high. Even a thundershocking realm expert would not be willing to bear such a heavy burden during a battle. Invincible realm experts could already ignore the weight of VX alloy. But every invincible realm expert in the dark world was a real big shot, and their combat equipment was not comparable to VX alloy at all. But Mochizuki Song had always liked this alloy. So did the master of Samsara Palace. What they liked was not the performance of VX alloy, but its camouflage function. Piece after piece of alloy reinforced her body. When Mochizuki Song stood up again, she had changed from a slender and tall beautiful woman to a tall and slightly fat figure that even looked a little burly. In the darkness, she reached out her palm. The sword energy surged, and the black cloak floating in the hall fell into her hand. Mochizuki Song slowly put on the wide cloak. Her figure slowly moved forward and walked out of the hall. Outside the hall, 2 figures with extremely strong auras stood quietly. The figure on the left was tall and burly, with bulging muscles. Every move of his was extremely aggressive. The figure beside him looked a little thin and quiet, but the danger he gave was no less than that of his companion. The black cloak walked out of the hall. The 2 men standing in front of the door with different figures were obviously stunned. The scene that seemed to have been sealed in the depths of their memories suddenly surged up. Their bodies stiffened, and they subconsciously muttered to themselves, "Palace Master." The figure under the cloak gave a faint Everything felt like it was yesterday. The thin figure took a deep breath, and his emotions became extremely intense in an instant. "I will secretly enter Wulan State from here, and then cross snow country to Beihai from Wulan State." Under the cloak, Mochizuki Song's voice was faint, a little hoarse and unquestionable. Even if the Jiang family of South America still has hidden forces, they are now delayed by Mr. Lin in South America. As for Sanctuary and Knights Templars, most of their forces have entered Beihai. Now it's too late for them to come back. So before the end of the final battle in Beihai, you are the top combat force in Europe. An extremely sharp killing intent surged out from under the cloak. "Here, I leave it to you, and so do Sanctuary and Knights Templars." "Understood." The 2 figures tightened their bodies and said in a deep voice. Mochizuki Song said faintly. The 2 looked at each other, quickly turned around, and left the hall. These 2 people were the trump cards left by Mochizuki Song to resist the external pressure. Under such circumstances, the top half-step invincible realm experts were enough to decide everything. And these two people were the top half-step invincible realm experts. They were silent for a long time. But none of them was a nobody. Samsara Palace, Duke. Samsara Palace, General. Chapter 978. When the screen dimmed, it seemed that the whole world became silent and clear. The tea swayed slightly. His Majesty lay back on the recliner, looked at the time silently and waited patiently. The recliner creaked and shook with the same rhythm. His breathing slowed down. His heartbeat slowed down. His whole body and mind were completely relaxed. He felt the quieter and clearer world around him. His Majesty was motionless, like a dead thing. In absolute silence, the memories that had become a little fuzzy because of too long times surged in his mind. He was Jiang Xianxia. He had the heavenly king heart and the exquisite bone. In terms of martial arts talent, he was not inferior to Wang Xingxiao, Li Tianlan, or anyone else. Whether in the past or now, in the vast Zhongzhou state, or even the entire Dark World, there were only two people of the younger generation who could be taken seriously by him: Li Tianlan and Wang Xingxiao. The former carried the dilapidated family on his back and moved forward. If he didn't move forward, he would die. The latter carried the glorious family on his back and was careful. If he didn't move forward, he would fall back. Many, many years ago, when Jiang Xianxia first heard the story of these two people, there was only one thought in his heart. It was tiring to live like this. Whether it was Li Tianlan or Jiang Xianxia, it was tiring to live like this. It was like a kind of transformation from a human to an inhuman. Countless halos, everyone's attention, a bumpy road ahead, a dangerous future, surging winds and clouds, magnificent waves, stormy waves. Being born as a human seemed to be like an origin. Standing at the origin, whether it was Li Tianlan or Wang Xingxiao, they were born with the responsibility to move forward. So they strode on their own path, crossed everything, and smashed everything. If they failed, they would become dry bones on the road, from a human to a ghost. If they succeeded, they would set foot on the peak with glory, from a human to a god. If they failed, they would become stories and lessons. If they succeeded, they would become beliefs and symbols. They couldn't stay at the origin. They were born as human beings. From the very beginning, their life direction had been determined. Jiang Xianxia didn't like such a life. He had always thought that he was a person without ambition and didn't want to pursue what he shouldn't get. He liked a quiet and warm life, a good family background, and a status that wouldn't be ignored or taken too seriously. He was very satisfied with all of this. If there were no accidents, he felt that he could guard the Jiang family and Beijiang for the rest of his life. It was warm, calm, and without sharpness. This was Jiang Xianxia when he was young. The year he entered the Deep Sea Academy, he was 22 years old, and his personality had not changed much from his youth. He did not establish his own force within the academy, and the reason why he rarely fought with others was because of the academy's missions. He did not hurt the friendliness of others, and was always kind to others. Everyone knew that he was very strong, so no one was willing to provoke him, and he did not provoke others either. Gentle temperament, easy to get along with, low-key, but powerful. During his 3 years in the Deep Sea Academy, he had made friends all over the academy, even in the Sky Academy. Among them was Li Tianlan. It might not be appropriate to call them friends. He and Li Tianlan never had a heart-to-heart talk. Their friendship seemed to be limited to sitting together and chatting. At that time, Li Tianlan was proud and arrogant. During the 3 years in the Sky Academy, he showed off his abilities. The life of holding the little princess of Beihai in his left arm and the daughter of the Dongqing clan in his right arm could be said to be the peak of everyone's dream. At the end of the first academic year of the two academies, Wang Tianzong personally went to the Li family's camp to propose marriage, promising to marry Wang Yuetong to Li Tianlan, and their first child in the future could be surnamed Li. No one knew whether it was because of guilt or other reasons. Li Hong had joined the Wang family of Beihai. The Li family left the camp in the second year of the two academies and took root in Jiangxia. At the beginning of the third year, Li Tianlan, who had recultivated, was well prepared. 3 months after entering the Thundershocking Realm, he went straight to the peak of the Thundershocking Realm and completely defeated Gu Hanshan, the young master of Kunlun City, in 45 seconds. Li Tianlan was 22 years old that year. He was the youngest expert at the peak of the Thundershocking Realm in the entire Dark World in 100 years. From that time on, Gu Hanshan completely fell from the ranks of the top geniuses. People called him and Wang Xianxia the young chosen one, a thing of the past. That year, Wang Xianxia successfully broke through and entered the peak of the Thundershocking Realm. Li Tianlan, Wang Xianxia. The Gemini stars of Beihai shone on each other, and their names resounded throughout the Dark World. Jiang Shangyu, who was undisciplined, did not alienate Li Tianlan at that time, but he did not deliberately get close to him either. At that time, he had been thinking about his Jiang family and Beijiang. He wanted to protect everything he had and live a quiet life. The friendship between gentlemen was as indifferent as water. He did not know whether he and Li Tianlan were gentlemen or not, but the friendship between them was really as indifferent as water. If Li Tianlan had not suddenly and violently turned against the Wang family of Beihai in the end, the friendship between them might have lasted for a lifetime. When they were old, they might have become real friends or even confidants. But there were no ifs in the world. The year when he joined the Wang family of Beihai, Li Tianlan was 20 years old. The year when he parted ways with Beihai, Li Tianlan was 26 years old. The 6-year honeymoon period had completely broken up before anyone could react. At that time, there was no Gemini stars of Beihai in the Dark World. Instead, it was double invincible of Beihai. Wang Tianzong, Li Tianlan. Jiang Shangyu was not completely sure about Li Tianlan's state at that time, but it was certain that Li Tianlan, who had left Beihai, was in a similar state to the current Li Tianlan. Neither of them entered the invincible realm. But the actual combat capability was far beyond the peak of the invincible realm. So at that time, Beihai had 2 majesties. This might be a foreshadowing. No one knew the inside story of the break between the 2 sides at that time, but after it happened, there was no need to know. Maybe it was because they were uneasy about Li Tianlan's rapid growth. Maybe it was because Li Tianlan spoiled Gu Xianyan, whom he forcibly snatched from Kunlun City, which caused the Wang family of Beihai's dissatisfaction. Maybe Li Tianlan himself had other ideas. But the trigger of everything was the child. Wang Yuetong and Li Tianlan's child. At the age of 25, Wang Yuetong was 6 months pregnant, but one day she suddenly went to the hospital. The child was gone. Li Tianlan stayed silent for a whole year, silently accompanying Wang Yuetong, and then left Mount Dibing alone the next year. The huge contradiction completely erupted in a way that left everyone dumbfounded. The situation was chaotic. Jiang Shangyu wanted to stay out of it, but his father, Jiang Shan, felt that the time was ripe and wanted to go further. So Beijiang became Jiang Shan's bargaining chip and was involved in the chaos. After leaving Beihai, Li Tianlan, who needed to find a new headquarters for Emperor Dong's palace, naturally set his eyes on Beijiang, which was sparsely populated and rich in resources. He did not choose to stay in Zhongyuan or Jiangxia. At that time, he just casually and calmly said a sentence at the meeting of the Hidden Dragon Sea. "I want Beijiang." Without discussion or probing, it was as simple and direct as a notice. No one could imagine how insufferably arrogant Li Tianlan could be at that time. That kind of strength and majesty was simply irresistible. Li Tianlan said he wanted Beijiang. The academics were silent, the Prince Group was silent, the Special Warfare Group, the North Group and the Southeast Group, which had almost no sense of existence, were silent. Except for the giant group that expressed its support, the 5 groups all seemed to acquiesce in this fact. It was not until more than a year later that Jiang Shangyu learned through special channels that on the night of leaving Mount Dibing, the Sword Emperor, who had been invincible for decades, lost to the 26-year-old Li Tianlan. This was also the main reason for the silence of the Southeast Group. Li Tianlan wanted Beijiang. The Jiang family, Jiang Shangyu, other people, other forces, Li Tianlan didn't even look at it. He was indeed qualified to be arrogant. All the resistance of the Jiang family was directly disintegrated by Emperor Dong's palace. The provincial government of Beijiang was directly reorganized, the direction of the parliament changed, the military retreated, and the industry of the Jiang family suffered a fatal blow overnight. Jiang Shangyu looked for Li Tianlun. He said that he just wanted to guard Beijiang and the Jiang family. At that time, Li Tianlun looked at him for a long time. The Jiang family is yours, but Beijiang is not. That was his answer. The Jiang family persisted in Beijiang for more than a year. Emperor Dong's palace continued to develop in Beijiang, and the Jiang family almost became a joke. 28 years old. Li Tianlun, who had not entered the invincible realm, broke through again. Supremacy. Jiang Shan, who was completely at the end of his rope, could only look for Li Tianlun to beg for mercy. Li Tianlun let the Jiang family go, just like letting go of an ant. He also casually took something from her. He took away Jiang Shan's heart. His memory was a little fuzzy. Jiang Shangyu didn't know what Jiang Shan had done to turn the tables in that year and angered Li Tianlun. It didn't matter. Right and wrong were meaningless. Jiang Shangyu only knew that he was guarding the broken Jiang family, watching countless so-called super forces in the dark world bow down to Emperor Dong's palace, watching Kunlun City fall apart little by little, watching the Wang family of Beihai's influence decline, watching the Wang family of Beihai win Gu Xingyun again in order to turn the tables, and watching Li Tianlun die. Half a year after the fall of the Chosen One, he was forced to go to Beihai, facing the completely crazy woman and the completely crazy sword. The sword light rose with the wind, and the poison followed like a shadow. He fell into the darkness, and when he opened his eyes, he returned to his childhood. The scars on his body clearly recorded what had happened. Right and wrong really didn't matter anymore, and he couldn't tell. Jiang Shangyu became his majesty. In this life, he still didn't have too much ambition, but he had an obsession. Li Tianlun owed the Jiang family a heart. He wanted to get it back. He wanted to build a dynasty that could completely destroy Emperor Dong's palace from the front. In that era when he was extremely powerless, under the glory of Emperor Dong's palace, even the invincible realm experts had to bow down to the thunder-shocking realm experts of Emperor Dong's palace. Peak of the invincible realm? Super forces? Top experts? They were as humble as dust, as nonentities, as wild dogs, worthless and not worth mentioning. Jiang Shangyu didn't want to experience that era again. He didn't want to be a ghost, nor a dog. He just wanted to live like a human being. The bell rang in the dark living room. The bell reverberated and rang 10 times in a row. At 22 o'clock at night, Jiang Shangyu moved his body slowly. Time was passing. Tick-tock. Jiang Shangyu stood up and drank the tea beside him. He closed his eyes and felt every part of his body, every joint, every muscle, and even every cell. He stood there quietly, but all the power in his body was unprecedentedly active and surging. The darkness in the living room grew deeper and deeper, swallowing the light and covering everything. At 22:15, he opened his eyes. In the dark room, the world in front of him became extremely clear. His heart was beating slowly. In a place not too far away from Xianyuan City, another faint heartbeat completely overlapped with his own heartbeat. The extreme darkness slowly condensed in the living room. Jiang Shangyu's body disappeared little by little, quietly. An incomparably violent heartbeat suddenly rang out in the empty living room, like the roar of thunder. The darkness spread out, rushed out of the living room, rushed out of the courtyard, rolled over the sky, and covered the stars. It was boundless. That was the purest domain of the dark world in the past 100 years. You saw heaven and earth. The world in your sight was me. Chapter 979. The sky became darker in the darkness. On the lawn inside Emperor Dong's palace, Li Tianlun, who had been quietly standing there with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes when he heard the violent heartbeat in the distance. It could not be said that they were telepathic or attracted to each other. The moment he opened his eyes, the world in front of him seemed to have changed. The subtle and rapid changes kept moving forward, covering Xianyuan City, Emperor Dong's palace, and the whole world. The night was darker, and the night was quieter. The world was originally quiet. In the corner of Emperor Dong's palace stood many figures with powerful auras. They were all representatives of the superpowers in the dark world. The summit appointment caused a sensation in the dark world. All the superpowers had submitted applications to Emperor Dong's palace before the final battle. Everyone wanted to be a witness of this battle. Li Tianlan personally made the decision and sent an invitation to all the second-class superpowers in the dark world. Most of the superpowers sent representatives to watch the battle, except for two. One was the Purgatory of Heaven capital. The other was the Wang family of Beihai. The representatives of the superpowers stood in different corners and waited silently. It could be said that Li Tianlan's confidence to let the whole dark world witness this summit appointment. It could also be regarded as a naked show of force by Emperor Dong's palace. The representatives of the superpowers needed this battle to determine the terror of the supreme combat capability in the dark world and to determine their attitude. Li Tianlan also needed them to witness this battle to completely establish the position of Emperor Dong's palace. Today, tonight, at this moment, Li Tianlan won this summit appointment. He was the real Emperor Dong, which meant that the shadow of the Sword Emperor would completely disappear. Li Tianlan breathed softly. He stepped on the grass with his bare feet and took a step forward. The darkness in the distance approached Emperor Dong's palace in an instant. Countless eyes were gathered on Li Tianlan. At this moment, the representatives of the superpowers didn't notice anything unusual, but they instinctively felt a little uneasy. Li Tianlan silently looked at the night sky in the distance. The darkness that seemed to be integrated with the night spread rapidly in the distance and covered everything. Bang! The second violent heartbeat suddenly rang out. In an instant, darkness completely covered the whole Emperor Dong's palace. Like smoke, like fog, dead silence, gloomy. All the lights in Emperor Dong's palace disappeared in an instant. The starry sky was completely swallowed by darkness, leaving only darkness between heaven and earth. Lightless city. A night without light. All the spectators couldn't even see the battlefield. There was only darkness left in front of Li Tianlan. Why did you choose to be my enemy? A calm and gentle voice rang out without warning. It rang in Li Tianlan's ears. It rang in everyone's ears in Emperor Dong's palace. The voice was low and sweet, and it kept echoing within the area of Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan's pupils contracted slowly, and his eyes became extremely focused. It really is you, after a pause, he continued. It's really you. His tone seemed to contain countless emotions, but it also seemed like he had no emotions at all. In the darkness, the voice was like the whisper of a demon, reverberating in everyone's ears. Li Tianlan opened his mouth. He seemed to want to say something, but he suddenly fell silent. The voice was so clear and familiar. This was the voice that Li Tianlan had heard just a few days ago. He was sure that it was Jiang Shangyu's voice. The information given to him by the military counselor said that the mysterious master came from the Jiang family, and it was very likely that it was Jiang Shangyu. All of this was consistent with the information. Why Jiang Shangyu had this kind of combat capability was not important now. The important thing was this voice in the darkness really Jiang Shangyu? If it was Jiang Shangyu, why did he take action now? The last time he met Jiang Shangyu was 4 days ago. The night before that day, he flew from Tian'an to Huading and killed Zhu with one blow. Then, in the middle of the night, he went directly from Yuzhou to Kunlun City in Beijiang, seriously injured Gu Xingyun, and took Li Qingqing away. Jiang Shangyu went to the hospital because of Li Qingqing. He traveled thousands of miles in a day and faced 2 invincible realm experts. There was no doubt that Li Tianlan consumed some energy. No matter how big or small the consumption was, it always existed objectively. If Jiang Shangyu wanted to take action, it was the best choice to fall out with him that day. Moreover, Li Qingqing happened to be in the hospital at that time. But he chose to give in and chose to fight today. There seemed to be many reasons, but no matter which one, it was a bit far-fetched. The most reasonable explanation was that Jiang Shangyu did not have the ability to challenge Li Tianlan that day. If Jiang Shangyu didn't have this ability that day, then was the voice in the darkness Jiang Shangyu really Jiang Shangyu? Or you? Li Tianlan took the initiative to ask. His voice could not be covered by the darkness, and it also resounded through the whole world. It's really, who am I? Or you? The summit meeting at the highest level, the inexplicable conversation, in the darkness, everything seemed extremely strange. The vast sword energy filled the whole Emperor Dong's palace, blending with the ubiquitous darkness and constantly fighting against it. It was completely dark in front of her. A wind of nothingness blew through the luxurious living room. Her soft long hair was blown by the wind. Qin Weibai stood in front of the window and looked at the darkness outside. Her face was a little pale. You see, he began to doubt. Doubt leads to thinking. What kind of answer do you think he will think of? What kind of fact will he perceive? Suddenly, Jiang Shangyu's voice rang out beside Qin Weibai with a hint of laughter. The area where the sword energy and the darkness intertwined. Suddenly there was a slight blank. A transparent figure that seemed to be completely condensed from the air stood there, and his tone was a little playful. As Qin Weibai's personal bodyguard, Horsewoman wanted to take action immediately. She suddenly took a step forward. Before she started to attack, Qin Weibai's voice had already sounded, "Don't move." Horsewoman's body stayed where it was, and her long golden hair was flying wildly in the darkness. Her eyes were fixed on the transparent shadow, and her breath was extremely fierce. In Tianlan's sword intent, "How dare you appear beside me?" Qin Weibai looked at the shadow. In the darkness, her eyes were extremely cold. He is not at his peak state. As long as he doesn't really step into that realm, I have nothing to be afraid of. The shadow said blandly, "I'm just a shadow. I have no killing intent, no aggressiveness, just pure consciousness. Li Tianlan can't find me." Qin Weibai looked at him quietly. After about 5 or 6 seconds, she said blandly, "Get out. We have nothing to talk about." "Are you sure?" The shadow laughed. "It's true that I won't tell Li Tianlan that Qin Weibai isn't Qin Weibai. He may not believe it even if I tell him. But I can guide him slowly. For example, right now, he has begun to suspect that Jiang Shangyu isn't Jiang Shangyu. If I deliberately guide him, he will find out that you're a fake sooner or later. What will you do then? What will he do? Tut tut, the heavenly son of a generation, I think he will completely collapse at that time, right? I really look forward to it. You underestimate him too much." Qin Weibai said coldly. "I can give you a chance. If you help me do 3 things, Jiang Shangyu will always be Jiang Shangyu. This is the deal between us, and it is also our secret." The shadow's voice was indescribably tempting. In the darkness, Qin Weibai smiled extremely beautifully. "Get out." The shadow was silent for a moment. He slowly disappeared where he was. Sword energy and darkness filled the blank area again. His voice rang in Qin Weibai's ear. "You will regret it." The next second, everyone in the entire Emperor Dong's palace heard Jiang Shangyu's answer to Li Tianlan. He laughed and said, "You can call me your majesty." Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. In the absolute darkness, he took a step forward and raised his palm. The sword energy was like a tide. The tide was monstrous. The violent sword energy suddenly bloomed with his whole body as the center. In the absolute darkness, dazzling bright sword light appeared one after another. The light was boundless. Li Tianlan stood in the center of the light, raised his head, and looked up at the enemy in front of him. His sword light did not pierce the darkness in front of him, but it illuminated the enemy in front of him. A figure more than 20 meters tall stood silently in front of Li Tianlan. He looked down at Li Tianlan like a giant looking at an ant. In the darkness, Jiang Shangyu's voice rang out. "Is it fun?" Chapter 980. The whole picture seemed to be completely out of reality for a moment, and it became extremely weird. The dark figure was extremely deep and solid in the light of the sword light. He was more than 20 meters tall and had strong limbs. There was absolute power in silence. The surging darkness continued to converge toward the giant-like black shadow. The giant's body moved. The next second, there was a sudden violent roar between heaven and earth. The giant, who was more than 20 meters tall, raised his arm and punched Li Tianlan hard. It was a strange domain that had never been seen before, an incredible fighting method, and a nightmarish fighting style. This was the domain. It was a domain that surpassed the peak of the invincible realm. No one could have imagined that the domain above the peak of the invincible realm would have such a change. Li Tianlan frowned. The huge fist blocked almost all of his vision above his head. The giant's upper body tilted and his knees bent. The solid fist broke the space. As his whole body sank, the surging darkness madly gathered on his fist. His body was getting smaller and smaller, more and more illusory, but the black fist was constantly getting bigger and bigger. Li Tianlan's figure flickered slightly and was 100 meters away in an instant. Boom! Amidst the deafening roar, the black fist directly smashed into the verdant grassland. The turf within 100 meters nearby was suddenly lifted into the air, and the soil was flying. The huge crack centered on the place where Li Tianlan originally stood continued to spread around. Li Tianlan's body floated in the air, and the ferocious cracks spread rapidly from his feet with great power. Countless cracks crisscrossed in the area of nearly a kilometer, like a ferocious and ugly spider web. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and suddenly laughed. "How is it?" Jiang Shangyu's voice echoed heavily in the darkness. "You're a little interesting now." With a smile on his face, Li Tianlan's eyes were bright and focused, with a temperature that was constantly rising, becoming blazing and excited. He was not an absolute martial arts addict, but standing at his height, he was indeed a little lonely. No one could understand exactly what kind of path he had found in the desert during the 2 years. Lin Fengting had some guesses. After talking with him, Saint also had some guesses, but their thoughts were not completely accurate. Li Tianlan could be sure that he was the strongest in the dark world today. Except for Wang Tianzong in the period of Mormons, no one was his opponent. Including Lin Fengting. Including Li Guangtu. That was why Emperor Dong's palace believed that the old era was over and a new dawn was coming. Then Li Tianlan met Jiang Shangyu. For hundreds of years, since the dark world had the invincible realm, he was the first opponent to break through the limit of the peak invincible realm from the direction of the domain. Li Tianlan's confidence never wavered, but such an opponent was indeed interesting to him. Prostrate, the giant on the ground slowly stood up. Darkness completely condensed into his body. The sword light illuminated his body that was getting taller and taller. His expression could not be seen. The giant's face was pitch black without any facial features. Jiang Shangyu did not speak. Amidst the silence, the giant raised its hands again. The boundless domain continued to shrink. Without any warning, the space distorted. The giant clenched his fists and punched forward without hesitation. He was hundreds of meters away from Li Tianlan. The two thick arms kept elongating in the darkness. In the blink of an eye, they had covered a distance of hundreds of meters and were directly in front of Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan's figure slightly intertwined in the sword light and the darkness, just avoiding the huge fist. The powerful shock wave surged unscrupulously inside Emperor Dong's palace, and the whole palace was shaking. The arms that seemed to be able to easily smash everything suddenly moved horizontally at the moment when Li Tianlan dodged. In the dense sound, the neat forest behind Li Tianlan was completely swept away. Countless trees flew around, and leaves fluttered. Light and darkness constantly intertwined. Li Tianlan's footsteps did not stop. As his step fell, an identical shadow appeared beside him. The two Li Tianlans took a step in opposite directions at the same time. So the two Li Tianlans became 4. The 4 identical shadows moved again. Under the giant's iron fist, there were 8 identical Li Tianlans, but their movements were completely different. Boom! Without any hesitation, the giant waved his arms wildly. When the huge force surged out from the left and right sides, the pressure on the top suddenly increased. 2 arms appeared on both sides of the giant's body again, and then 2 more. It was an incredible scene. What an appalling power. 6 dark arms spread wildly, like a windmill, smashing down along Li Tianlan's shadow without interruption. Violent wind and rainstorm. 8 shadows were moving. Li Tianlan's body shuttled freely among the shadows. This was the shadow formula he learned from tribulation. In Li Tianlan's view, this could almost be said to be the most amazing unique skill in the dark world in the past 100 years. At this moment, in his hands, It had almost been exerted to the extreme. The sky was full of fist shadows. From Li Tianlan's perspective, the huge fist shadows were like wild beasts rampaging in the dark sky. His body moved, and the eighth shadow stayed where it was. The sword light shone, and the 8 figures condensed by sword chi became more and more fierce. Li Tianlan slowly took a step forward in the sky full of fist shadows. The 9th and last shadow appeared where it was. In an instant, Li Tianlan stood on the head of the giant. The 9 shadows still maintained Li Tianlan's appearance. But Li Tianlan turned into a sword light in an instant. It was a soundless step, a step without any smoke or fire. His bare feet stepped on the giant's head. In the darkness, he became the most dazzling and blazing blade. The sword light all over the sky did not break out, but quickly gathered toward Li Tianlan's body and condensed to the extreme. Countless sword lights and monstrous sword chi completely illuminated the whole night at this moment. The light shrank along Li Tianlan's body. The 9 shadows disappeared one by one. Li Tianlan's body became brighter and brighter, more and more dazzling. The 6 arms of the giant frantically grabbed his head. Li Tianlan gently stamped his feet. He was not ruthless. He was barehanded. His whole body was like the sharpest magic weapon in the world, and also like the most dazzling light in the world, piercing the darkness in an instant. Endless light tore the giant's body in the darkness, and it fell down. The giant's figure was broken by the sword light little by little. The giant disappeared. Li Tianlan stood on the ground, looked at the surging darkness, and narrowed his eyes. "What are you looking for?" A soft, low, but extremely strange voice rang in Li Tianlan's ears. There seemed to be chaos around Emperor Dong's palace, but Li Tianlan did not hear any sound in his perception. Only the clear sound of footsteps could be heard in front of him. Jiang Xiangyu's figure came out of the darkness. Li Tianlan looked at Jiang Xiangyu, expressionless, and did not mean to speak at all. Jiang Xiangyu's body stood 20 meters away from Li Tianlan. His figure stopped, but the footsteps did not disappear. Instead, they became clearer and more frequent. It was as if hundreds or thousands of people had walked into the darkness, and then walked out from the darkness. They came out. A figure walked through the darkness. Another one. There were more and more figures in the darkness. They were all Jiang Xiangyu. Every one of them was Jiang Xiangyu. 100, 300, 500, 1,000. Countless Jiang Xiangyu completely surrounded Li Tianlan in the middle. "I'm right here." All the Jiang Xiangyu spoke at the same time, with a roar of voices. "What are you looking for?" Countless Jiang Xiangyu did the same action. They pressed their faces. In an instant, hundreds of Jiang Xiangyu all turned into Li Tianlan's appearance. Li Tianlan stood in the middle, surrounded by countless himself. The voice in the darkness laughed, and even the voice seemed to be exactly the same as Li Tianlan's. Li Tianlan looked at the strange smiling faces on the faces of countless people around him, and his face became cold little by little. "Are you looking for me?" The darkness was still surging. All the Jiang Xiangyu became Qin Weibai. "Are you looking for me?" His voice was a little pitiful and mocking. "Poor thing who has been cheated, can you still find me?" Chapter 981. Li Tianlan stood where he was and narrowed his eyes. The countless Qin Weibais around him did not decrease. Instead, there were more and more. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of identical figures occupied every place in his field of vision. In front of him, in the distance, beside him, behind him, and in the sky. There were Qin Weibais everywhere. They were clear and vague. The darkness floated quietly around him, like the night of the world. Everything seemed to be the same as the ordinary night. Countless Qin Weibais were half hidden in the darkness in the distance, forming a breathtaking but extremely terrifying picture. The world seemed to be dead. There was no sound at all, only eternal darkness. This was a domain beyond the peak of the invincible realm. Not to mention other people in the dark world, even Li Tianlan himself had encountered such an opponent for the first time. His invincible confidence had never been shaken, but now he really did not see the direction of this martial arts clearly. This could not even be called martial arts. In terms of combat capability and destructive power, Jiang Shangyu was not the strongest. But the extreme change of the domain after surpassing the peak of the invincible realm made Jiang Shangyu the most difficult person to kill and defeat. The dark domain in front of him was extremely clear, but it surrounded him in a trance. It was an indescribable feeling. The other party's domain was in front of him. He could see it, but he could not feel it, let alone destroy it. In the dark domain, everything was divorced from reality, but it had substance. To some extent, they might also be a kind of reality, the reality that only belonged to Jiang Shangyu. For example, the image of the giant that penetrated the sky and the earth, and the boundless figures now. Weird, changeable, and incredible. In his own domain, Jiang Shangyu was almost invincible. Hiding the head and showing the tail, is this the battle in your heart? Li Tianlan said slowly. His voice was calm, without any wavering or other emotions. I'm right in front of you. Jiang Shangyu smiled faintly. The world you see is me. The boundless crowd in front of him began to change. The figures of Qin Weibai's kept twisting and turning into different people one after another. Men and women, old and children, countless people, completely different people. Bang! Li Tianlan's heart beat violently. The heartbeat seemed to drive a great force, and the darkness in front of him suddenly twisted for a moment. Layers of seemingly endless sword intent once again surged in the realm of darkness. Jiang Shangyu's cold voice resounded through the whole field. Are you going to risk your life? If you can't see through my domain, you'll die here tonight. In the darkness, countless sword qis kept rising. Li Tianlan glanced at the crowd in front of him. The crowd was still changing, and the number of people seemed to be increasing. Everything in front of him, apart from the darkness, was only the silhouettes of people in the dark. I can't see through it, he said faintly and slowly closed his eyes. The figure in front of him disappeared. Only darkness existed. The only difference between opening and closing his eyes was the lack of countless figures in front of him. Jiang Shangyu's remaining laughter suddenly disappeared. The corners of Li Tianlan's mouth lifted slightly. His clothes were torn and wrinkled. In the dark, he stood on the ground with his bare feet on the bed. His eyes were closed, and he was motionless. But at this moment, Li Tianlan gave Jiang Shangyu a deadly sense of danger. If he couldn't see through it, then he wouldn't look at it. This was Li Tianlan's choice. A gust of wind appeared in the realm of darkness. Countless footsteps could be heard. The footsteps became more and more hurried, faster and faster, pressing in from all directions. Whoosh! In the dull sound, a clenched fist slammed into Li Tianlan's face. This seemed to be just the beginning. The next second, overwhelming attacks instantly rushed in front of Li Tianlan. The endless crowd rushed toward Li Tianlan. They were weak and small, but extremely dense. The attack power of each person was not even as good as that of an ordinary person. But there were too many people, and everyone seemed to be desperately trying to hurt Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan took a gentle step forward. The dazzling sword light suddenly shone in the darkness. The sword light cut into the crowd without any hesitation. In the blink of an eye, there was an open space in front of Li Tianlan. There was no blood, no corpses. As the sword light passed, all the figures nearby disappeared. The next second, the figures behind filled the void and rushed toward Li Tianlan again. Dunk, dunk, dunk. The loud heartbeats sounded in the crowd. The sound was getting louder and louder, as if it resonated with the whole world. The whole dark realm was shaking slightly. The ubiquitous sword energy in the realm began to spin faster and faster. In the darkness, the extremely bright sword light lit up in every corner of the realm. The crowd all over the realm disappeared one by one and turned into nothingness. Only the sword light was getting brighter and brighter. Boom! There seemed to be a sudden clap of thunder in his ears. The dazzling lightning lit up in the darkness. Several figures burned with blue electric arcs and directly hit the sword energy in front of Li Tianlan. One after another. Each figure was like a full blow from a thunder-shocking realm expert. There was no pause, no interval. The dense figures approached Li Tianlan crazily and then disappeared under the sword light. There were fewer and fewer figures in the realm, but their strength was getting stronger and stronger. The figures of the thunder-shocking realm began to appear. Then came the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. Then came the half-step invincible realm. One after another, the illusory figures with real power exploded in front of Li Tianlan as if they were self-detonating. Li Tianlan kept moving forward, heading in a certain direction in the darkness. He was firm. The figures of the thunder-shocking realm disappeared. The dark realm became extremely empty. A few figures were still appearing, and all of them were of the half-step invincible realm. The suicidal attacks came one after another. The sword energy in front of Li Tianlan finally began to dissipate little by little. From beginning to end, Li Tianlan didn't open his eyes. The experts of the half-step invincible realm disappeared. The figures in the huge dark realm were almost completely gone. Amidst the heavy footsteps, a few remaining figures slowly approached. There was no communication. The majestic power suddenly exploded around Li Tianlan. From all directions and in all directions, the frenzied attacks brought forth wave after wave of torrents of power. There was no realm or sword energy, but this was indeed the power of the invincible realm. The power of several invincible realm experts. In the dark world, Li Tianlan opened his hands. His entire person seemed to have once again turned into a sharp divine weapon that could shake the world. With him as the center, the violent sword energy suddenly broke through the obstacles around him and lit up the whole realm in an instant. Several violent currents of power were completely torn apart, and several figures of the invincible realm in the realm were directly smashed into nothingness at the moment when the sword light broke out. I see. Li Tianlan stood where he was, and his voice was soft. Xianxia didn't speak. There was dead silence in the dark realm. This is your realm? Li Tianlan laughed. It wasn't until this moment that he understood Xianxia's so-called realm and the extreme changes of the realm above the peak of the invincible realm. In his own realm, Xianxia was almost omnipotent. As long as his stamina and strength were sufficient, he could do anything. He could become a giant that surpassed reality, and the densely packed figures could transform as he wished. No matter how he transformed, the essence of this transformation was power. It was the power of Xianxia. If he wanted, he could even use his power to create dragons, ghosts, and even missiles and fighter jets in his own realm, fancy things. He could do whatever he wanted. But no matter what he made, the power of the things he made had a limit. What was Xianxia's limit? The things he made in the realm would be one level lower than his limit. This was the realm after the peak of the invincible realm. It was an incomparably real illusion. The realm in front of him could be said to be Xianxia's world, a world that belonged only to him. Li Tianlan stood quietly in the same place, keeping his hands open. It suddenly rained in the dark world. The extremely condensed raindrops fell from the sky, and each raindrop carried extremely pure sword energy. Li Tianlan's figure flashed in each raindrop. The rain was getting heavier and heavier, covering the whole realm. Li Tianlan's smile became more and more obvious. He opened his eyes and muttered to himself, "I see you." Chapter 982. The rain condensed by the sword qi continued to fall, from light to dense, hurried, and violent. There was a violent roar in the dark domain. The sword rain was like a waterfall, as if to overturn the whole world. Li Tianlan's figure appeared in every drop of rain. Every drop of rain was his eyes, and even his body. The rain spread out from Li Tianlan's head and covered the whole domain. The next second, Li Tianlan's figure disappeared. The strong sword light, like a meteor, instantly condensed into one point and stabbed straight into the void in the darkness. Light and darkness suddenly intertwined. Wherever the sword light passed, the darkness of the void boiled completely, and the violent power held up against the dazzling sword light. The next moment, Li Tianlan and Xianxia's figures instantly drew closer. The crazy roar of the dragon reached its peak in an instant. At such a close distance, there was almost no room for the two sides to dodge. Li Tianlan's body seemed to be pulled by his own strength, and the dragon fist full of absolute explosive power directly hit Xianxia's chest. Jiang Shangyu had completely integrated with the darkness. His body was dark, and his whole body seemed to be weightless. The fist that hit his face drove his body to float back half a meter. The moment he avoided the attack, Jiang Shangyu's whole person changed completely. Strong, cold, and crazy. The whites of Jiang Shangyu's eyes were completely occupied by the black eyeballs. In the darkness, his dark eyes reflected Li Tianlan's every move. His will was absolutely focused, and the storm-like attacks did not stop for a moment. Jiang Shangyu could always dodge half a second or even a few tenths of a second in advance. The darkness and the sword light constantly blended and collided, and the two figures seemed to completely become two flickering ghosts. Dodge, attack, and counter. Jiang Shangyu's movements were not as fast as Li Tianlan's, but his perception seemed to be more sensitive than Li Tianlan's. He could always predict Li Tianlan's movements one step ahead. Most of the time, he was dodging, but every counterattack was fatal and dangerous. The dragon roar became louder and louder. Li Tianlan was completely combining the 72 styles of dragon fist at will. The overwhelming dragon shadow with majestic power crazily bombarded everything in front of it. Blood splashed out in the darkness. In an instant, the two of them were covered in wounds. Jiang Shangyu's eyes were completely focused, and his dark pupils became more and more terrifying. The moment the blood fell to the ground along the wound, he suddenly stopped. Li Tianlan rushed forward. This time, he didn't use ruthlessness at the summit. He didn't even have a sword in his hand. But at this moment, his whole body was full of sharp sword light. The sword light was like a tide, completely locking Jiang Shangyu. Amidst the faint sneer, Jiang Shangyu suddenly retreated. His retreat continued to accelerate. The sword light flew wantonly around him, and blood splattered. He directly withstood countless sword lights with his own body and once again got rid of Li Tianlan's blockade. The dark domain surged crazily. Within the domain, torrential rain poured down crazily. Li Tianlan frowned slightly. He couldn't find where Jiang Shangyu was at the moment. Experts who had reached this stage from the domain path were undoubtedly the most troublesome to deal with. In their own domain, they were almost omniscient and omnipotent. Their close combat abilities might be average, but if they hid in their own domain and were not discovered by others, they would be able to exhaust most of their opponents to death. The seemingly substantial darkness was constantly twisting. In the heavy rain, before Li Tianlan could perceive Jiang Shangyu's position, the innumerable darkness had condensed together and changed its shape. The boundless darkness condensed into extremely ferocious-looking machines one after another. Huge and incredibly huge barrels stretched out from the machines, one by one, two, more and more, densely packed. Without any hesitation, all the barrels fired at the same time. One by one, the cannonballs condensed by the darkness suddenly flew out, covering the sky and the earth. They exploded wildly around Li Tianlan, and the world seemed to be completely overturned. The violent vibration and the strong shock wave tore Li Tianlan's body, which was extremely real. At this moment, Li Tianlan seemed to be really in a tragic battlefield. There were cannonballs and explosions everywhere. Although there was no smoke and fire, the power was almost the same. The cannonball fire covered the entire domain. Countless cannonballs exploded everywhere in the domain. There were more and more ferocious black turrets, and the firepower was getting more and more violent. Without any hesitation, Li Tianlan went straight forward and swept his arm. The dazzling sword light brought an arc of light up to 100 meters long in front of him. The sharp edge tore the huge turret in front of him. The dark turret disintegrated in the air, and then turned into things like armored vehicles and tanks. The cannonball fire became more and more intense, and a large number of tanks directly rolled toward Li Tianlan's face. The darkness was still surging. Silently, a huge shadow flew over from the sky. It was in the shape of a fighter plane, but the body was densely packed with cannons. Countless cannons flashed in the dark in silence, and all aimed at Li Tianlan. This was destined to be an eye-opener for everyone in the dark world. Not to mention others, even Li Tianlan had learned something new. This was the real domain. Within the domain, this was Jiang Shangyu's own world. As long as he had enough strength, as long as his will could continue to fight, everything he imagined could be completely condensed in his own domain with his own strength. It was endless. If Li Tianlan couldn't find a way to break the situation, his physical strength would be exhausted little by little, and he would eventually die here. This way of fighting might take a long time, but the possibility was real. The cannonball poured down silently. Main battle tanks, armored vehicles, fighter planes, cannons, rocket launchers, grenades, and all the modern weapons that could be imagined were materialized by martial arts in this domain of martial arts. The pressure was getting greater and greater. Li Tianlan couldn't move an inch. So he stopped. Boundless sword light surrounded him, forming a cocoon that was almost solid. The crazy cannonball fire hit the cocoon around him, causing ripples after ripples. Li Tianlan's eyes were cold. A touch of impatience gradually appeared on his face. With an impatient expression, he said calmly, "You've had enough fun." So, Li Tianlan's aura suddenly fell to the bottom. "It's time to end it." His light voice rang in every corner of the domain. Li Tianlan raised his palm. The aura that had fallen to the bottom began to rise as he raised his hand. Qi-controlling realm, ice-condensing realm, fire-flaming realm, thunder-shocking realm, peak of thunder-shocking realm. The aura that vaguely surpassed the peak of the invincible realm completely disappeared. At this moment, Li Tianlan's strength was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. A dazzling blue electric arc lit up on his fingertip, bringing with it sword light, sword intent, and sword energy. Li Tianlan's face turned slightly pale for a moment. Under the bombardment of countless cannonballs in the darkness, he flicked his fingers gently. Crack! Amidst the subtle sound, the blue electric arc flashed in the darkness. The next moment, the whole domain was full of blue lightning. The lightning flickered, completely twisting, exploding, and spreading in the most extreme way, covering everything with the purest destruction. The endless cannonball fire disappeared in an instant. All the cannons and weapons were crushed into powder by the extreme twisting blue lightning. Crack! Only a faint crackling sound could be heard, with an inconceivable frequency, getting faster and faster, faster and faster. The whole domain was completely occupied by lightning. Crack! Jiang Shangyu's incredulous voice sounded. "This is..." He hadn't finished his words. Everything was gone. The cannonball fire, weapons, and Li Tianlan all disappeared completely. Jiang Shangyu stood in the darkness, and his heart kept sinking. He glanced around vigilantly, and his eyes became more and more solemn. In the empty domain, Li Tianlan's voice sounded beside him. "What are you looking for?" Divine Emperor of Nine Heavens. Chapter 983. The incomparably dense darkness completely wrapped his whole body, and he was completely integrated with the darkness. It was the darkness itself, the domain, the world, and the air. In this state, the domain was not a part of him, but he had become a part of the domain. In today's dark world, he was the only one who had broken through the peak of the invincible realm from the direction of the domain and entered a new level. Even in the story he once lived, he was the only one who had entered this level in this direction. In terms of actual combat capability, he was indeed not in his heyday now, but he knew very well how to optimize his path. What he wanted was not only a complete recovery. He wanted to completely surpass himself in his heyday. Finding more aid was the first step, and seeing the old man whose mental strength had reached the transcendent realm in the Holy Land was the second step. Now he had done a better job in the variability and authenticity of the domain than in his heyday. Back then, Dongqing Huangta had his own day and night. The path that Jiang Shangyu pursued was a clear illusion. So he had enough confidence to challenge Li Tianlan. Jiang Shangyu didn't think he could win, but he didn't think he would lose either. At least he wouldn't suffer a loss. Li Tianlan had never faced an opponent like him, so he hid in the domain and was invincible. In the first fight under normal circumstances, Jiang Shangyu was sure that Li Tianlan couldn't find him and see all his trump cards. Jiang Shangyu could carefully observe Li Tianlan's state when Li Tianlan didn't know him well enough. He had always been very confused about Li Tianlan's current state. Jiang Shangyu was very clear about his own situation. He was different from Li Tianlan. He used to be a super expert who had surpassed the peak of the invincible realm. His martial arts might not be perfect, but after all, the foundation of his body was still there. Even if he experienced growing up again, he had the foundation in his body, just like the master of Samsara Palace. So they could bear the power of the peak of the invincible realm or even more powerful with their relatively young bodies. Their physical conditions had laid the foundation in the past. So they didn't need to break through, they just needed to recover. But Li Tianlan was different. He could be said to be Dongqing Huangtu in that story, but in reality he was Li Tianlan. Time travel, rebirth, recovery, all the words couldn't be used on him. His martial arts needed to go step by step and break through bit by bit. His physical foundation was also getting stronger little by little, but it was far from perfect. Li Tianlan was 24 years old this year. Under normal circumstances, his body could bear the power from the peak of the thunder-shocking realm to the half-step invincible realm at most, but what he exerted was the combat capability beyond the peak of the invincible realm. How did he do it? Li Tianlan was like that. So was Dongqing Huangtu in the past or in the future? In that incomparably true story, Dongqing Huangtu entered the secular world at the age of 19. The year he parted ways with the Wang family of Beihai, he was 27, but he defeated Wang Tianzong. At that time, he had not really entered the invincible realm. The year Dongqing Huangtu died, he was 29 years old. From 27 to 29, he didn't enter the invincible realm, but he completed the final transformation. The whole world did not know Dongqing Huangtu's secret. Even after his death, no one knew. Maybe Gu Xianyan knew it at that time, but no one was sure about it. And now, this was the secret that Jiang Shangyu wanted to know the most. It was the key to him suppressing Li Tianlan, and even the key to his complete transformation to the Supreme. He urgently needed to know what was going on with Li Tianlan's current state. Then, in the seemingly not very fierce but extremely strange and dangerous battle, Jiang Shangyu saw the extremely twisted blue lightning in Li Tianlan's hand. All the secrets were hidden in that seemingly unremarkable bolt of lightning. At that moment, Jiang Shangyu's scalp went numb, and he once again felt a long-lost panic in his heart. Perhaps most people did not know what that lightning meant. But standing at Jiang Shangyu's level, he clearly perceived how terrible the nature of that lightning was. That lightning with the power of the peak of the thunder-shocking realm was too fast. No matter how fast a lightning with the power of the peak of the thunder-shocking realm was, it could not threaten Jiang Shangyu in the domain. But the problem was that the lightning was not fast. It was the frequency. That extremely twisted frequency. Jiang Shangyu could not determine how fast the lightning twisted, but he could be sure that within a second, the lightning in Li Tianlan's hand directly twisted thousands of times. Every time it twisted, it was almost equivalent to the full outbreak of an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. At that moment, it was equivalent to countless experts of the thunder-shocking realm attacking at the same time. The spreading lightning covered the whole domain. Every ray of light, every trace of light arc, and every glimmer of light was equivalent to an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. This was Li Tianlan's current state. His body could not bear the great pressure brought by the invincible realm. But his martial arts were perfect. The dual wind and thunder veins brought him unimaginable strength and speed, and the strong vitality of the dragon vein gave him absolute recovery. In the state of outbreak, when his aura fell to the bottom, his whole body had been completely relaxed. His strength was condensed to the limit in a second, but it was not a one-time outbreak. Li Tianlan divided his strength and sword intent into countless parts, each of which was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, layer upon layer. Every part of the power was perfectly within the range that his body could bear. The frequency of every attack, the frequency of the lightning twisting, and the speed of recovery of the body formed a perfect balance. Jiang Shangyu did not know what this meant, but he could be sure that when there were a certain number of experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, even the real chosen one could not withstand the siege of absolute numbers. How many people at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm were there in the whole dark world? This realm originally represented the limit of ordinary geniuses. Every second that the seemingly weak lightning kept twisting, or even every millisecond, represented an earth-shattering power that could kill an ordinary expert of the invincible realm in seconds. And this level of full attack was not too much of a burden for Li Tianlan, which meant that as long as Li Tianlan wanted to do it, he could maintain this terrifying and unimaginable state. This time might be very short, 30 seconds, 1 minute, but combined with the twisting frequency of the lightning, it was too long to maintain this state for a second. What if Li Tianlan was willing to pay a certain price? Could he raise the power of the peak of the thundershocking realm to the half-step invincible realm, or even to the invincible realm? In that state, Li Tianlan would definitely be seriously injured, but everything in front of him would be completely torn apart. What would it be like when this high-frequency twisting power reached the peak of the invincible realm? Jiang Shangyu's heart suddenly turned cold. Unparalleled fear occupied all his consciousness in an instant. He did not dare to imagine that picture at all. Now, Li Tianlan could twist the lightning thousands of times in a second without getting hurt. As his physical fitness continued to improve, how terrifying would it be when he could twist the sword intent of the peak of the invincible realm thousands of times in a second? Thousands of experts at the peak of the invincible realm would attack at the same time? That was the power that could completely challenge the whole world. Jiang Shangyu could be sure that even Dongqing Huangtu had not reached this level at his peak. Did this mean that Li Tianlan was very close to Dongqing Huangtu? Countless images and speculations kept flashing in his mind. Invincible. For the first time, Jiang Shangyu had a very clear understanding of this word. There was no sound in the dark domain. Jiang Shangyu's eyes became more and more cautious, slowly scanning everything in the domain. The lightning caused severe damage to the entire domain. Everything in the domain disappeared, and the domain itself was fragmented. Countless darkness slowly surged along Jiang Shangyu's body. Jiang Shangyu's aura became a little weaker, and the domain gradually formed a hole again. Haven't you found it yet? Li Tianlan's voice sounded again. It seemed to be far away, but also seemed to be close at hand. Jiang Shangyu's heart kept sinking, and his body was stretched to the limit. What are you looking for? Haven't you found it yet? The corner of his mouth twitched, and he laughed at himself in his heart. He even wanted to laugh. Everything in front of him seemed to be a joke. He was omniscient and omnipotent in his own domain, but in his own domain he couldn't find his opponent. Li Tianlan must be in the domain. But Jiang Shangyu couldn't find him. What was this? Why was it like this? How did he do it? This was even more of a blow to his confidence than when Jiang Shangyu found out Li Tianlan's true state. After all, the extremely twisted sword light was at the level of swordsmanship. Jiang Shangyu never thought that the domain must be worse than swordsmanship. Li Tianlan's swordsmanship could reach that level, and he believed that the domain could, too, but he hadn't found the way to that level yet. But now, Li Tianlan was in the domain, but he was out of his perception. The psychological impact on Jiang Shangyu was completely different from before. This was equivalent to Li Tianlan suppressing Jiang Shangyu's advantage in what he was best at. How was this possible? Crackle, crackle. The faint sound of the electric current was still ringing in the domain, and the extremely huge destructive power would not dissipate for a while. The pain spread from every part of his body to his brain. Because of the absolute tension, Jiang Shangyu's body affected the wound, and his shirt had been completely dyed red with blood. Crackle. In the faint sound, he stared at the faint electric light in front of him, which seemed to dissipate at any time. Here, without warning, a palm appeared on Jiang Shangyu's shoulder. A huge force came down from above and pressed Jiang Shangyu's body down in an instant. The moment Jiang Shangyu, whose face changed dramatically, knelt on one knee, a domineering and fierce leg swept toward his head. The dragon's roar echoed fiercely, right beside his ears. Without any room to react, Jiang Shangyu held his head with both hands and rolled to the side in a very embarrassing posture on the ground. The darkness surged, and Jiang Shangyu was 20 meters away in an instant. He turned around and stared in the direction of the attack just now. The darkness there was quiet and stable, and there was nothing strange. Where is he? Jiang Shangyu's eyes narrowed tightly. The dark domain covered the entire Emperor Dong's palace. He could almost see every corner and every detail in the domain. He could even see the ants carrying some breadcrumbs 400 or 500 meters away. But he just couldn't see Li Tianlan. His figure spun quickly in his domain. In all directions. No Li Tianlan. Two arms stretched out silently from behind him and instantly wrapped around his neck. Jiang Shangyu, whose aura was fluctuating violently, did not hesitate and burst out all the power in his body in an instant. In an instant, there seemed to be a black sun rising in the domain. The black sunlight was completely boiling, evaporating everything in the domain. Jiang Shangyu gasped rapidly, and his heart became more and more flustered. The moment the arms wrapped around his neck, he fought back completely out of instinct. When the black sunlight swept everything around, Jiang Shangyu could clearly feel the arms wrapped around his neck. But he could only feel the other party's arms. At that time, there was no one behind him. This was not an illusion. There was really no one. Jiang Shangyu didn't know what was going on at all. The domain that he was proud of was completely used by Li Tianlan. In his omnipotent domain, he could see through everything. But when it came to Li Tianlan, he was like a blind man. The light suddenly lit up in the darkness for a moment. The dazzling sword light appeared directly in front of Jiang Shangyu without any warning. The sound of clothes being torn and blood flying at the same time. The sword light shredded his shirt and left a long gash on his chest. Jiang Shangyu's face was livid. It wasn't an expression of extreme anger. Instead, it was more like an expression of extreme shock. Traces of black light surged from afar. It gradually covered his whole body from head to toe. Jiang Shangyu's body seemed to be covered with a layer of black gauze. Bang! The sound of the crazy vibration of the joints was like a dragon's roar. A fist that seemed to be able to penetrate everything also appeared on his back without any warning. There was no sound of the wind when the fist was waved, only the majestic and incredible power. It seemed to be a sudden burst of strength at a close distance. The hard knuckles smashed on Jiang Shangyu's back. There was a loud noise in his whole body, as if his internal organs were crazy. Vibration. The gauze composed of black silk threads suddenly twisted and offset most of the power. But Jiang Shangyu's figure flew out nearly 20 meters under this punch, and a mouthful of warm blood sprayed directly from his mouth. Before the blood fell to the ground, the sword light appeared from behind again and slashed at his neck. There was no time to straighten up. Jiang Shangyu rolled on the ground desperately. His breathing became more and more rapid, his face gradually pale, and the surrounding domain began to become unstable. You look like a wild dog that has been beaten and can't fight back. In the silent darkness, Li Tianlan's voice rang in his ear. The corner of Jiang Shangyu's mouth twitched. He gritted his teeth and said word by word, "I am a human." Li Tianlan said faintly. Jiang Shangyu turned his body and looked around. He was silent for a long time before he gritted his teeth and asked, "Where the hell are you?" This was definitely not a question that he should ask. But he asked it. This was definitely not a question that Li Tianlan would answer. But Li Tianlan also gave the answer. "Look back," he said. Chapter 984. Looking back, Jiang Shangyu didn't look back. The moment he heard Li Tianlan's voice, he rushed straight ahead. There was no attack behind him. The dark domain that enveloped the entire Emperor Dong's palace was churning and shrinking wildly. The starlight and the night reappeared. The huge domain shrank to 100 meters in less than a breath, and then shrank again. 50 meters, 30 meters, 15 meters. Li Tianlan inexplicably felt a trace of familiarity. Everyone who saw this scene felt that it was very familiar, but also very strange. The domain, which had shrunk to 15 meters, had become completely substantial. The darkness formed the strongest wall, and countless glimmers flickered on the dark wall. Jiang Shangyu stood in the center of the dark wall, with an indestructible momentum. This was the unique skill of the Jiang family of South America. 30-meter mortal world. Before Jiang Shangyu appeared, it was known as the strongest domain in the dark world, and its defense was the best in the world. But this was also Jiang Shangyu's unique skill. The limit of 30-meter mortal world was only 30 meters. It was known that there was nothing to fear within 30 meters, but Jiang Shangyu exceeded the limit and shrank the domain by half again. When the domain was condensed to this extent, the defense was not simply doubled. The dark wall was completely condensed. Standing in the darkness, Jiang Shangyu appeared in front of all the spectators for the first time. In countless corners of Emperor Dong's palace, the representatives of different forces were watching this scene quietly. When the domain spread to the entire Emperor Dong's palace, they could only see darkness and the occasional sword light in the darkness. At this moment, it could be said that Jiang Shangyu appeared in people's sight for the first time. It's going to end. In the office on the 5th floor of Emperor Dong's palace, Saint, Li Shi, and Sidu Tangyue, the 3 deputy palace masters, stood side by side and watched Jiang Shangyu appear from the darkness. Saint said lightly. Li Shi did not speak. Sidu Tangyue nodded and said yes. The most tricky thing about Jiang Shangyu was his domain. For the time being, no one had a deep understanding of the domain beyond the peak of the invincible realm, which was also the biggest variable. But at this time, Jiang Shangyu completely shrank the domain, which meant that he gave up his biggest advantage and became defensive. He defended in front of Li Tianlan. This was a complete joke. In the center of the dark wall, Jiang Shangyu's body had been tense to the limit. He couldn't find Li Tianlan, nor would he believe Li Tianlan's nonsense. The only thing he could do was to shrink his domain to the extreme. Within a range of 15 meters, there was no space for Li Tianlan to hide at all, and the extremely condensed domain was not something that Li Tianlan could break at will. He had tested out Li Tianlan's true state, and the purpose of the challenge had been achieved. At this point he could already retreat to Beihai. Countless eyes were focused on Jiang Shangyu. It was quiet inside and outside the domain. In front of him was an extremely solid wall, and outside the wall was the night sky and starry sky of Emperor Dong's palace. There was no Li Tianlan. A drop of cold sweat flowed down Jiang Shangyu's forehead, and there was only astonishment left in his heart. How could there be none? What is he hiding? Where is it? Jiang Shangyu cautiously moved his body. Everything was normal inside and outside the domain. He was the only one there. But he was sure that Li Tianlan was nearby, somewhere he couldn't see. Since he couldn't see Li Tianlan, he naturally didn't dare to retreat. Jiang Shangyu took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. The tall walls surrounding him stood before him, solid, deep, and heavy. That was his ultimate defense in his current state. Li Tianlan might be able to break the domain by force, but he definitely couldn't do it in a short time. His expression calmed down little by little. He was safe in the domain. Li Tianlan couldn't break his domain, which meant that he could force his way out of Emperor Dong's palace. Just like Li Tianlan couldn't see through his domain before, so he chose not to look at it. He couldn't find Li Tianlan's position now, so he wouldn't look for it. Without any hesitation, the domain, which had shrunk to a range of 15 meters, shook violently. Jiang Shangyu's body rose into the air and was about to rush into the distance. He didn't care about the so-called face. He didn't have much expectation for this challenge. Now that he had confirmed Li Tianlan's current state, it was a worthwhile trip. Tonight, the dark world might laugh at him, but after dawn, everyone would shut up. His feet left the ground, and the domain was shaking. His speed instantly increased to the limit. Sprint! Jiang Shangyu's body had already risen into the air, but he didn't rush out. He felt a sharp pain in his scalp. The moment his feet left the ground, a hand directly reached out from behind him and grabbed his hair. Because the speed was too fast, this grab almost scratched off his scalp. Jiang Shangyu gave a muffled groan and didn't react for a while. "Why don't you look back?" In the faint voice, the attacks fell like a storm in an instant. The whole Emperor Dong's palace fell into a dead silence the moment Li Tianlan's voice sounded. The Heroes Club, the Men in Black, the Shadow Throne, all the representatives of the forces stared at the scene in front of them, as if they were completely petrified. All the high-level officials of Emperor Dong's palace looked incredulous, as if they had seen a ghost. Jiang Shangyu didn't see anything. He was only suffering attacks, continuous attacks. But his figure appeared in everyone's sight, so everyone saw Jiang Shangyu and Li Tianlan. In the luxurious bedroom, horsewoman stood beside Qin Weibai with a puzzled look. She subconsciously glanced at Qin Weibai and asked, "How did he do it?" "I don't know," Qin Weibai said quickly. She frowned tightly and stared at Jiang Shangyu, who was being attacked crazily. There was no surprise in her eyes, only a touch of confusion and worry. She didn't know what Li Tianlan's state meant. At least in the stories she had read and heard, Dongqing Huangtu didn't seem to have this kind of martial arts. Everything seemed to have changed at this moment. Li Tianlan, Dongqing Huangtu. Different times. The parallel lines that were parallel to each other and finally intersected seemed to fly in different directions again after a short intersection. Why is this happening? Qin Weibai murmured to herself and shook her head hard. Is this still martial arts? Saint stared at the battlefield. The battlefield was getting farther and farther away. Jiang Shangyu wanted to run. The moment Li Tianlan's attack broke out, the two moved crazily. The domain within 15 meters. Li Tianlan had been in the domain all the time. Li Tianlan couldn't break this domain in a short time. And Jiang Shangyu, who was in an extreme defensive posture, couldn't cancel this domain in a short time. The area of 15 meters had become a domain where death and danger coexisted. The unique skill that once belonged to the Li family broke out without reservation. In close combat, Li Tianlan was not afraid of anyone at all. Jiang Shangyu didn't even have a chance to look back. He could only hide. Without looking back, he just ran forward crazily. He ran out of Emperor Dong's palace and rushed into the old city area of Xinyuan City, which was being renovated. The two figures gradually disappeared from sight. Saint suddenly turned back, looked at Situ Zhangyue, and said seriously, "What is this?" Li Shi was also looking at Situ Zhangyue. In their minds, in the whole dark world, apart from Li Tianlan, it seemed that only Situ Zhangyue could answer this question. "I don't know." Situ Zhangyue recalled the scenes just now. Li Tianlan was in the domain. But when Jiang Shangyu appeared, not only Jiang Shangyu, but also all of them didn't see Li Tianlan in the space of 15 meters. Situ Zhangyue smiled bitterly and whispered, "I think apart from Tianlan, only my brother can answer this question." Boom! A loud noise suddenly came from the distant night. An abandoned low-rise building waiting to be demolished completely collapsed under the huge force. Smoke and dust flew all over the sky. Jiang Shangyu's body fell from the ruins with the broken building at the same time. Blood spurted out of his mouth. He knelt on one knee on the ground and coughed violently. "Why don't you look back?" Li Tianlan asked again. The voice was right in his ear. Jiang Shangyu suddenly turned back. The domain was still there. But there was nothing behind him. Jiang Shangyu felt cold all over. There was nothing behind him, except for his shadow. The distant starlight and light converged, outlining his shadow on the ground. The shadow was very faint. Jiang Shangyu knelt on the ground and lowered his head. His shadow was standing, maintaining a posture of waving a fist. Jiang Shangyu looked confused. He hesitated and said in a hoarse voice, "What is this? How did you do it?" Li Tianlan's voice came from his shadow. His voice was also confused. "I don't know." Chapter 985. The dilapidated building collapsed completely, and countless pieces fell to the ground. In the smoke and dust, Jiang Shangyu dodged the falling heavy objects. He stood where he was and was silent for a long time. His shadow moved with him, always maintaining an offensive posture. All kinds of emotions swirled in his mind, getting stronger and stronger. Some were absurd, some were frightened, and some were confused. All the emotions reached their limits in the shortest time. Jiang Shangyu gasped and opened his mouth. He seemed to want to laugh, but after his whole body froze there. He was omniscient and omnipotent in his domain. He shrank his domain to maintain defense, but he couldn't find Li Tianlan. The answer was simple and absurd. Li Tianlan was now in his shadow. Almost all the people watching the battle in Emperor Dong's palace saw this scene, but no one could understand what was going on. The moment Jiang Shangyu's feet left the ground, The shadow behind him moved directly to his side, reached out, and grabbed his hair. Then it was attack. They fought out of Emperor Dong's palace and into the old city. Smoke and dust flew, the building collapsed, and the stones flew. From beginning to end, people couldn't see Li Tianlan. Jiang Shangyu seemed to be playing boxing with his shadow, or to be beaten unilaterally by the shadow. He had no power to fight back. Li Tianlan became Jiang Shangyu's shadow. In this state, he could ignore any attack at all, because all the attacks couldn't hit him. The living person walked into the shadows of others. Did Li Tianlan become someone else's shadow? Or existed in someone else's shadow? If it was the former, how did he do it? If it was the latter, then from the perspective of physics and biology, what kind of way did he exist? At present, there seemed to be no way to explain this matter. At least for the time being, science couldn't explain it, nor could martial arts. Merging into the opponent's shadow from the domain. This time was very short, but it seemed to break some incomprehensible definitions. But for now, neither Li Tianlan nor Jiang Shangyu understood what it meant. Jiang Shangyu looked at his shadow silently. He didn't move. Li Tianlan in the shadow was also motionless. Everything seemed to have an answer. Jiang Shangyu gradually narrowed his eyes and laughed coldly. You can't attack? The shadow didn't speak. But Jiang Shangyu directly confirmed this. This kind of combat style of directly entering the opponent's shadow could no longer be described as strange. It was completely impossible to guard against. In this state, Li Tianlan was truly invincible. Invincible was not an adjective, but a real state. He could attack unscrupulously, but he was not afraid of any form of attack. At the very least, he was not afraid of any physical attack. Nobody can hurt him. Then he could kill anyone. If this was a unique skill without any restrictions, Jiang Shangyu knew very well that he would not be able to live until now. With Li Tianlan's strength, he could not even survive a minute in front of Li Tianlan in this state. Obviously, this kind of unique skill had great limitations. Jiang Shangyu calmed down completely. He recalled the scenes he had just experienced, and his eyes kept flickering. This kind of unique skill might be unlimited, but Li Tianlan obviously hadn't found the right way to use it. The level of the attack he had just endured was far lower than Li Tianlan's normal attack intensity, and the attack rhythm was very slow. It seemed that Li Tianlan needed to constantly adjust every time he made a move, but it was unknown what this adjustment would cost him. I can't attack? In the shadow, Li Tianlan's playful voice sounded. To be exact, what you need is time. Jiang Shangyu looked extremely embarrassed, but his voice became calm again. So, the last thing you should give me is time. Under the dim light, some of the dim shadows suddenly flared up. Jiang Shangyu's shadow instantly left his body. Jiang Shangyu did not move. But the shadow began to dive directly. One after another, incomparably illusory sword energy and invisible matter stabbed Jiang Shangyu silently. Compared with just now, Li Tianlan's attack seemed to be a little stronger, but the frequency was a little slower. Boom! The ruins on the ground were completely lifted up by the surging sword energy. Countless steel bars and stones were swept into the sky and turned into pieces. Jiang Shangyu's figure retreated quickly, and the domain around him was dissipating quickly. The completely illusory shadow seemed to have substance at this moment. After a short pause, the shadow directly punched. Li Tianlan's current state was extremely strange. He himself couldn't tell what was going on. But he could roughly understand his situation at this time. He appeared in Jiang Shangyu's shadow, and his every move consumed many times more physical strength than under normal circumstances. In this case, his body was completely illusory, which was equivalent to a real invincible realm state. But the power and frequency of his attacks were greatly limited to the combat capability of the invincible realm. If he wanted to break through this level of power, he didn't need to pay a heavy price. But once the power and frequency of his attacks exceeded this limit, he would directly come out of the shadow. Just as he told Lin Fengting in the desert, his path was unorthodox. He could use his existing system, martial arts, and the Li family's invincible manual to make his body reach the most balanced state, so that he could speed up his attack frequency countless times with the power of the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, and thus exert the strength beyond the peak of the invincible realm. But his realm had been stuck here, and he had not really broken through and entered the invincible realm. The combat capability of the invincible realm was his current upper limit, and also the limit of the power he could exert after merging into someone else's shadow. He couldn't achieve balance in the shadow at all, at least not now. If he was now at the peak of the invincible realm, or even really beyond the peak of the invincible realm, then even in Jiang Shangyu's shadow, his strength was still a super expert beyond the peak of the invincible realm. Jiang Shangyu couldn't hold on for a few seconds in his hands. But now the upper limit of his combat capability of the invincible realm, if he wanted to keep up with Jiang Shangyu's speed, he could only let Jiang Shangyu's shadow move by itself. This also consumed Li Tianlan's physical strength, and the power he could exert was further reduced. The most realistic situation was that all his attacks could not really break the defense of Jiang Shangyu, who was focused on defense. What he needed was a chance. A chance to completely master the rhythm and turn the illusion into reality, so as to hit Jiang Shangyu hard. Jiang Shangyu kept retreating, and his eyes were fixed on the shadow that followed him like a shadow. The countless illusory dragon shadows brought by the dragon fist rushed in front of him, and then slowly dissipated in the darkness. Wisps of obscure darkness kept penetrating his shadow. Even in this state, Jiang Shangyu still did not forget to fight back. Li Tianlan was indeed invincible now. But Jiang Shangyu didn't believe that there was really an invincible realm immune to all attacks. He was still trying to find a way to deal with Li Tianlan's wonderful state. The shadow followed him like a shadow. The two sides attacked and defended, and the rhythm was getting faster and faster. Jiang Shangyu kept trying. In different ways. All his counterattacks were in vain, but he never gave up, and the rhythm was the same. However, in the old city area that had been out of the sight of all the spectators, no one noticed that although Jiang Shangyu's counterattack rhythm remained the same, his body, which was constantly retreating, was getting tighter and tighter. Li Tianlan was waiting for an opportunity. Coincidentally, Jiang Shangyu was also waiting for an opportunity. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.